too slow. Do it again. What is wrong with you?" That was my mother-in-law's voice. Sharp, cutting, final. And underneath it, the sound of small hands working furiously against a pot that was too heavy and a scrubber that was too rough for a 7-year-old's palms. I had driven 4 hours from the airport on 3 hours of sleep. My flight from Denver had landed early, which is why no one knew I was coming. I hadn't called ahead. I hadn't texted. I was just a mother who missed her daughter and figured I'd surprise her. I surprised them instead. My name is not important right now. What matters is that I am someone's daughter, someone's wife, and more than anything, someone's mother. And the moment I stepped through that side door into my in-laws' kitchen, every version of myself collapsed into that last one. My daughter was standing on a plastic step stool at the kitchen sink. She was wearing her favorite yellow shirt, the one with the small embroidered sunflower on the pocket, and her hair was half unraveled from the braid I'd done 3 days ago. Her shoulders were curved inward. Her jaw was tight. She was scrubbing the inside of a cast-iron skillet like she was trying to erase something. My mother-in-law stood 2 feet behind her, arms folded, watching with the expression of someone inspecting unsatisfactory work. My sister-in-law was at the kitchen table. She was eating toast and scrolling her phone. She didn't even look up. Her 2 boys, 9 and 11, were in the living room, feet up on the couch, tablet screens glowing. And my daughter was at the sink, alone, scrubbing. I stood in the doorway for what felt like a full minute before anyone noticed me, long enough to hear my mother-in-law say, in a voice that wasn't even angry anymore, just tired and contemptuous like she'd said this 100 times, "You're not doing it right. You never do anything right." My daughter's shoulders went up to her ears. She scrubbed harder. I said her name. She spun around so fast she nearly slipped off the step stool. Her face, when she saw me, that was the thing I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Because it wasn't relief. It wasn't joy. Not at first. It was something sadder and older than a 7-year-old should ever feel. It was the face of someone who'd been bracing for another hit and couldn't quite believe the hit hadn't come. Then she burst into tears and ran to me, and I caught her and held her, and I didn't let go for a long time. My mother-in-law said very calmly, "Oh, you're back early." I looked at her over my daughter's head. I didn't say anything. I wasn't ready to speak yet. My sister-in-law put down her phone. She had the decency to look uncomfortable. The boys in the other room hadn't moved. I picked my daughter up. She's 7, she's not small, but I picked her up anyway, and I carried her to the guest room where her bag was, and I sat on the bed and I held her until she stopped shaking. She told me, in the way children tell you things, in pieces and fragments and backtracks, that this had been happening since the first day, that she was expected to help with dishes after every meal, that if she did it too slowly or not thoroughly enough, she was made to do it again, that she had spilled a glass of juice on the second night and her grandmother had made her clean the entire kitchen floor on her hands and knees while her cousins watched from the table. She said, "I didn't want to call you because I didn't want to make you feel bad." 7 years old. Protecting me. I went back out to the kitchen alone. My mother-in-law was rinsing the skillet my daughter had been working on. She didn't turn around when she heard me come in. "She needs to learn responsibility," she said, before I could speak. "You've spoiled her. She doesn't know how to do anything." "She's 7, I said. At 7, I was cooking full meals. Her father was too. "She's my daughter," I said, "not her father. And she's 7. My mother-in-law turned then. Her expression was the same one she'd worn at our wedding when she thought the centerpieces were the wrong shade of white. Tolerant disappointment. "You're very sensitive," she said. "She has to learn that the world isn't going to coddle her." My sister-in-law stayed quiet. She was looking at her toast. I went back to the room, helped my daughter pack her bag, and we left. I didn't make a speech. I didn't slam a door. I buckled my daughter into her car seat and I put on her favorite playlist and I drove. For the first 40 minutes I just listened to her talk about her cousins, about a movie they'd watched without her because she was doing the laundry. Yes, laundry. She'd been taught to operate the washing machine as a chore of penance for something she'd knocked over. About how she'd learned to wake up before everyone else to make sure she'd already done the morning dishes so there would be less to criticize. She said this casually, like she was telling me she'd learned a new strategy in a video game. I kept my face very still. I kept my voice very even. I said, "That sounds really hard, baby." She shrugged. It was okay. It was not okay. My husband's name was on the mortgage of that house. His parents' house. And mine. Here is the thing no one knew. Not my mother-in-law. Not my sister-in-law. Not the extended family that gathered every Thanksgiving to compliment my mother-in-law's gravy and my sister-in-law's new shoes. My husband and I had been quietly covering the monthly note on his parents' house for 3 years. It started when my father-in-law had a health scare and couldn't work for 6 months. We stepped in. We told his parents it was a short-term bridge, a family thing. What family does? But the 6 months became a year, and the year became 2. And somewhere in there, the reason we were paying stopped mattering to them and started being assumed. They never asked, they never acknowledged. They sent a card at Christmas, but it was addressed only to my husband. And my sister-in-law, who lived in the guest cottage behind that house with her 2 boys and no job and her mother's patience and her mother's protection, had contributed exactly nothing. But my daughter had scrubbed a cast-iron skillet while her cousins played upstairs. When we got home, I ran my daughter a bath and ordered her favorite dinner and sat with her until she fell asleep. Then I went to the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and stared at the number. 3 years, 36 payments, automatic, quiet, invisible. I thought about calling my husband. He was still on his work trip, not back until Thursday. I thought about waiting, about discussing it, about being rational. Then I thought about my daughter waking up before sunrise to do dishes so there would be less to criticize. I closed the joint account portal and opened the one that was mine alone. I made 2 phone calls the next morning, one to our bank and one to the mortgage servicer on the house. I explained that the automatic payments being drawn were being disputed and I needed to initiate a formal stop. They walked me through it. It wasn't complicated. It took 11 minutes. My mother-in-law called that same afternoon. She was warm, the way she is when she wants something. "I hope you aren't still upset about yesterday," she said. "I only want what's best for your daughter." "I know you believe that," I said. "She'll thank me someday. You have to understand, when her father was her age." "I need to go," I said. "I'll talk to you later." I didn't talk to her later. On the 5th day after I stopped the payments, she called again. Her voice was different this time. "There seems to be some kind of issue with the house account," she said. "We got a notice about a missed payment. Do you know if something happened with the bank?" "Yes," I said. "I stopped the payments." The silence on the other end was long. "What?" she said. "I stopped paying the mortgage." She didn't speak for another few seconds. When she did, her voice had gone very careful. "I don't understand. Why would you do that?" "Because your granddaughter woke up before everyone else every morning to do dishes so you would have less reason to criticize her," I said. "Because she was made to scrub a floor on her hands and knees in front of her cousins. Because she told me she didn't want to call me and worry me. She is 7 years old. She has spent the last 3 years of my marriage having every flaw she has examined and catalogued by you, and I have been patient because she is my husband's family and I wanted to respect that, but I am done." Another silence. "You're overreacting," she said. "This is dramatic." "Maybe," I said. "The payment isn't coming back." I hung up. My sister-in-law called 20 minutes later. She was not calm. "Do you know what you're doing to this family?" she said. "Mom and Dad could lose the house." "Yes," I said. "Over dishes? You're going to blow up everything over dishes?" "I'm going to stop paying for a house where my daughter was treated like a problem," I said. "Whether you think the reason is big enough is not my concern." "You're being insane. You're being completely—" "I have to go," I said. "Take care." I had expected the anger. I had braced for it, actually. What I hadn't expected was how quiet I felt afterward, how steady. I had spent 3 years managing my reactions in that family, softening my edges, picking my battles, telling myself it wasn't worth it. And now that I had finally done the one concrete, irreversible thing, I felt like I was standing very still in the middle of a windstorm and the wind wasn't touching me. My husband called from his work trip that night. Someone had gotten to him first. He was not angry, to his credit. He was quiet in the way he gets when he's trying to be fair and it costs him something. "You should have waited until I was home," he said. "I know," I said. I'm sorry I didn't. My mom is really upset. I know. Do you think we could find another way to? She made her daughter clean the kitchen floor on her hands and knees, I said, while her cousins sat at the table, and then she told me I was overreacting. He was quiet for a long time. I didn't know about the floor, he said. She told me in the car on the way home. She mentioned it the same way she mentioned they watched a good movie, like it was just a thing that happened. You didn't say anything. She didn't call me because she didn't want to make me feel bad, I said. Our 7-year-old was protecting me. He exhaled, long and slow. I'll call you when I'm on the way home Thursday, he said. When he got home Thursday, we sat at the kitchen table after our daughter was asleep and I showed him everything. 3 years of payment records. The total was significant. We had never asked for any of it back. We had never asked for any of it back. We had never expected it. But we had given it, and they had taken it, and not once in 3 years had his mother been kind to our daughter in any sustained way that I could point to. He sat with it for a long time. Then he said, I'm not going to ask you to restart the payments. That was all. That was the whole conversation on that point. The following weeks were loud in all the ways that don't actually make noise. His extended family weighed in. An uncle called my husband to mediate. 2 cousins texted me separately, one to say I was wrong, one to say, quietly, that they had seen how my daughter was treated at family gatherings for years and they were sorry no one had said anything sooner. That second message made me cry in a way the first one didn't. The official notice went to the house 6 weeks after I stopped payment. The foreclosure process had started. My mother-in-law called my husband, not me. She didn't call me again for a while. My sister-in-law sent me a long email. It said that I had destroyed the family, that my daughter would grow up knowing she was the reason her grandparents lost their home, that karma would find me. It said a lot of things. I read it twice and then I archived it without responding. I did not owe her a response. I had spent 3 years being civil to a woman who let her son sit at a table and watch my daughter scrub a floor. I was done managing her feelings. The house sold at auction on a Wednesday morning. My husband knew the date. He went to work anyway. He didn't go to the auction. There was nothing to do there. His parents moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city, closer to my sister-in-law's new rental. I heard they were adjusting. I did not call to check. What I did was take my daughter to get her nails painted. She chose orange with little daisies, and she talked the entire time about a book she was reading and a song she'd learned in music class and a joke her friend had told her at recess. She talked the way children talk when they are not monitoring themselves, when they are not waiting for the next correction. She talked like she had room to breathe. I watched her and I thought about all the times I had dropped her off at that house and driven away telling myself it was fine, it was family, it was just their way. I thought about how many mornings she had gotten up early before I even knew to wonder about it. I thought about how she said she didn't want to worry me. A child should not have to manage a parent's emotions. That is the parent's job, and I had failed her by being so focused on keeping the peace that I hadn't noticed what the peace was costing her. That was a hard thing to sit with. I sat with it anyway. 3 months after the auction, things had settled into a new shape. My husband's relationship with his family was complicated and tender, and I stayed out of it as much as I could. That was his to navigate. We had long conversations in the evenings after our daughter was asleep about what we wanted family to look like, what we were willing to hold and what we weren't. It was the most honest we had been with each other in years. I hadn't expected the crisis to do that. I hadn't gone looking for it. But it happened. My daughter started 2nd grade in September. Her teacher emailed me at the end of the first week to say she was a joy, that she raised her hand eagerly, that she made friends quickly, that she had a wonderful sense of humor. I read the email 3 times. I cried a little the 3rd time. I don't know what my in-laws tell people about what happened. I imagine the version of events they tell doesn't include the skillet or the floor or my daughter's shoulders curved inward at the sink. I imagine it is a story about ingratitude and overreaction. That's fine. They can have that version. It's the only thing I'm letting them keep. Because I know what I saw when I walked through that door. I know what my daughter's face looked like. I know what she told me in fragments in the car, casually, like it was ordinary. And I know what she looks like now when she does her homework at our kitchen table and hums to herself and leaves her glass in the exact wrong spot and nobody says a word about it. That's what I wanted, not justice in any dramatic sense, not an apology. I stopped waiting for that a long time ago. Just my daughter at a table where she doesn't have to be careful, where she gets to spill things and be messy and be slow and be exactly 7 years old without anyone standing 2 feet behind her measuring her against a standard she was never going to meet. She still talks about her cousins sometimes. She misses them, I think, in the way children miss things that were part of their landscape, even when the landscape wasn't kind. I let her talk. I don't fill the space with my own feelings about it. That's her grief to carry and mine to stay out of. Last week, she drew a picture at school, a house with a yard and flowers and a dog we don't have yet but have been discussing. She put our names on the mailbox. She put a sun in the corner of the sky the way kids always do, with little rays coming off it like a crown. She brought it home and taped it to the refrigerator herself, very precisely, making sure it was centered. Then she stood back and looked at it with the serious satisfaction of someone who has completed an important task. Home, she said, just that one word, like she was confirming something. I looked at the drawing and I looked at her and I thought, yes, exactly, that's the whole word and everything it's supposed to mean. We built this one, and no one is getting in through the door unless they deserve to be here. The image I keep coming back to is my daughter's shoulders, the way they curved inward at that sink, the way she scrubbed harder when she heard a critical voice behind her, like she had already learned that working faster was safer than standing still. She was 7, and she had already learned that. I think about cause and effect a lot now, not in any grand or mystical sense, just in the plain and honest way that life tends to work. What we allow, we teach. What we stay silent about, we endorse. I had been silent for 3 years. I had been patient and diplomatic and strategic and careful, and the effect of all that careful silence was a little girl waking up before sunrise to get ahead of the criticism. That's the thing nobody tells you about keeping the peace. The peace has a cost, and usually it's paid by whoever is smallest in the room. What I did, stopping those payments, letting that house go to auction, some people will call it ruthless. My sister-in-law certainly did, but here's what I know now. That I didn't fully understand then. There is a kind of moral clarity that only comes when you stop asking whether your response is polite enough and start asking whether it's honest enough. For 3 years, I had prioritized being seen as reasonable over being actually right, and the effect of that choice showed up in my daughter's posture at a kitchen sink. She didn't deserve that. She never did. And I think what I found, standing in that kitchen doorway, was the specific moment where being good finally had to mean something more than being quiet. That's the part people misread as anger. It wasn't anger mostly. It was clarity. I looked at the situation, the skillet, the step stool, the cousins on the couch, the voice saying you never do anything right, and something in my thinking just went very sharp and very calm. I saw the numbers. I saw what I had given and what my daughter had paid for it, and I knew exactly what the right move was, not because I was emotional, but because for once I was thinking without the fog of wanting everyone to be okay with me. That kind of clear-eyed decision-making is something I had to earn. It came from years of watching what happened when I didn't use it. I'm not proud that it took so long, but I'm glad I finally got there. And then there's what came after, the part that mattered most to me. Not the auction, not the phone calls, not the family group chat exploding. It was my daughter at a table doing her homework, humming. It was her drawing a house with our names on the mailbox. It was the way she talked for 40 minutes straight in the car without once pausing to check whether she was saying too much. Watching her come back to herself required a different kind of strength than stopping the payments did. It required me to stay steady when she asked hard questions, to let her grieve things I wanted her to be free of, faster, to sit beside her feelings without rushing her through them. That's the long work, the work that doesn't look like anything from the outside but costs everything from the inside. What I want her to know, what I hope she absorbs somewhere underneath the orange nail polish and the daisy drawings and the jokes from recess, is that goodness is not the same as compliance. That intelligence is not just knowing the right answer but knowing when the whole question has been framed wrong, and that real strength is not the kind that performs for an audience. It's the kind that holds steady in a kitchen doorway when every instinct says to apologize and smooth it over, and instead just says, enough. She drew a sun in the corner of her picture with rays coming off it like a crown. I think she already knows.